Tecumseh, or Crouching Panther, was born on March 9, 1768, to Puckinwa, a Shawnee tribe war chief, and Methuataski. Tecumseh's father lived only 6 years after his birth. He was killed during the Battle of Point Pleasant in 1774. 1 year later, Tecumseh's brother, Lalawetheka, was born. Both Tecumseh and Lalawetheka grew up without their parents. After their father's death, their mother chose to move westward, trying to avoid the encroaching white settlers. Tecumseh and Lalawetheka chose differently. They wanted to stay and be raised by their 2 older siblings, learning the ways of the Shawnee warrior. Tecumseh adapted to the ways of the warrior quickly, but his younger brother lacked the skills necessary to be a successful Shawnee hunter and warrior. This flaw made Lalawetheka an outcast of the tribe, and he soon turned to alcohol to console himself. This low point in his life did not last long. In May 1805, Lalawetheka was put into a trance by the Master of Life and began to experience profound visions. These visions convinced Lalawetheka he needed to begin preaching. He became a religious leader and preached that white Americans were a source of evil, calling them the Great Serpent. Lalawetheka urged Shawnees and other local Indians to refrain from all white goods and their ways. After finding this new position among his tribe, Lalawetheka changed his name to Tenskwatawa, or the Open Door. Tenskwatawa soon found opposition in another Shawnee leader, Blackhoof, who wanted to maintain peaceful relations with the Americans. Only 3 years after his visions had begun, Tenskwatawa and Tecumseh moved their followers northwest and established Prophetstown, near the Tippecanoe River in present-day Indiana. This was the result of rising tensions with Blackhoof. Soon Tecumseh surfaced as the leader of this new Native American community. Tecumseh's first major leadership stance came with William Henry Harrison's negotiation of the Treaty of Fort Wayne in 1809. The treaty ceded 3 million acres of Native American land to the United States. Tecumseh and his people had no actual claim to the land, but he was still very alarmed by such a large-scale sale. He used an idea formed by a previous Shawnee leader, Blue Jacket, and a Mohawk leader, Joseph Brant, which said all Indian land was owned and shared collectively by all tribes, which meant no sale could be made without the consent of all tribes. Tecumseh first went after the tribes who negotiated and signed the treaty, but was unsuccessful. He began traveling throughout the area, encouraging others to join his fight to regain native lands. Tecumseh's second action was to try and convince Governor Harrison to nullify the Fort Wayne Treaty. He maintained that the sale was illegal and Americans should not try to settle on the ceded lands. Two years after the signing of the treaty, Tecumseh again tried to persuade Harrison to return the native lands. They met at Harrison's Indiana home, but Harrison was still trying to keep as much land as possible. An agreement was never reached. Tecumseh maintained that the Shawnee and their native counterparts wanted to keep peace with the Americans, but that it would be impossible without rectifying the current situation. Tecumseh began traveling south, trying to unite surrounding tribes, creating a unified front to approach Washington with. He wanted to revive Nealon's Pan-Indian Alliance of the 1760s. He tried to recruit allies from the 5 civilized tribes, but only the Creeks agreed to join and take up arms. This led to the Creeks War. While Tecumseh was recruiting allies, Tenskwatawa was left to take care of Prophetstown. He was under orders from Tecumseh not to have any confrontations with the whites. This request was not well met. On November 6, 1811, Governor Harrison arrived at Prophetstown with more than 1,000 soldiers. The expedition began simply as an intimidation tactic, but Tenskwatawa was not keen on this. He sent his warriors to attack the American forces. The warriors surprised the Americans during the night, but Harrison's forces held their own, and the Indians were forced to withdraw. The Americans emerged victorious and proceeded to burn the entire town. The effects of the battle rippled through the tribe. Tecumseh had lost faith in his brother as well as the Indian coalition they had formed. Although the battle proved a massive setback in the brothers' goals, they were determined to persevere. Tecumseh's war coincided with America's confrontation with the British during the War of 1812. Tecumseh quickly saw an opportunity in allying with the British and joined British Major General Sir Isaac Brock. Tecumseh's warrior instincts and expertise in warfare played a huge part in Brock's success as they approached Detroit. As they got closer, Tecumseh had his warriors parade in a circle, making it appear there were many more warriors than there actually were. This technique turned out to be very effective. American General William Hull surrendered at the sight of the approaching British and native forces. Their victory was not celebrated for long. A few months later, in the summer of 1813, an American commodore managed to cut off British supply lines and force them to withdraw from the Detroit area. The British retreated into Canada near Thames Valley. Tecumseh followed Brock to Canada, fighting U.S. forces from their rear and slowing their advancement. The next British commander to take over was Major General Henry Proctor. His relationship with Tecumseh was not like that of General Brock. He and Tecumseh rarely saw eye to eye on the strategies to pursue and failed Tecumseh in the worst way. On October 5, 1813, Proctor was supposed to meet Tecumseh and his forces at Chatham, Ontario, but he never showed. Tecumseh's men were left without support, and the Americans took a decisive victory over the British. Tecumseh was killed on October 5, 1813, at the Battle of Thames, near Chatham. Shortly thereafter, his coalition of tribes were forced to surrender to General Harrison. Tenskwatawa lived a much longer life. Initially, he tried to regain a position of leadership among Native American tribes in Canada, but he was unsuccessful. Years later, he returned to the United States and reestablished a Shawnee village near present-day Kansas City. He remained there among his people for another 10 years before passing away.